Hi everyone, my name is Palesa Madumo, convener of the 2021 Prism Awards. I'm also your host for a special 10-part series called Byline, where I'll be chatting to industry people about what is and is not working within the communication industry. This series is brought to you by the Prism Awards, as well as the Public Relations Institute of Southern Africa. My guest today is the fabulous author, entrepreneur, and founder of DNA Brand Architects, Mr. Sylvester Chauke.
Hello.
Hi, Sylvester.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. Good to be here.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too.
So you guys have recently celebrated 9 years in the industry. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You've also just won the most admired agency, according to Mark Libs, which is the industry. How does it feel, and what's the secret to success?
It feels incredible because, when you open a business or an establishment, you always think, if I can just survive, 1 year to another. And so looking back that we've done that for 9 years is so overwhelming in a positive way. It's incredibly encouraging, and we are very thrilled to have survived this long. And I would say that the secret is, there's so many things that make up a business. The right people, the right clients, the right opportunities, the right work. But I think overall it's just the drive to want to contribute to an industry which I think is incredibly important. And I think we've seen it in the last year, how important it is to have very good reputation for business and brands.
Absolutely. And I think you guys are doing a phenomenal job, considering that there is a lack of jobs in South Africa. So I think that's a huge congratulations. It's quite important to be able to run a company that long and provide jobs for people.
It's actually one of the things that is exciting about what we do, right? In business is not so much just the products and services we offer, but the livelihoods that that product and service business give to people. And it's really encouraging and overwhelming sometimes, as you can imagine, and especially when we were ushered into COVID, this year, and we realized that so much of what we do is reliant on so many other factors.
Absolutely.
So when business is struggling, it trickles down into us, and it trickles down into the audience. And so we have been having a really interesting outlook in terms of the actual ecosystem that we all belong to. And I guess our role as business owners, as businesses, is to participate in that as well, to help to make the ecosystem work better.
Absolutely, absolutely agreed. DNA was the first black agency to win Campaign of the Year at the Prism Awards in 2019. Do you think that is, obviously it's a great achievement, but what does that say about transformation in our industry?
The industry is highly untransformed. I think that's a fact. And the challenge is that the representation of the audiences that we serve in South Africa is underrepresented, and that is also a fact. And the number of black-owned agencies or agencies that do run with that idea in mind are also very few and far between. So the industry as a whole is incredibly slow and maybe ignorant, if I'm being honest, in the way that it sees the issue of transformation. And it's almost not at the forefront of business, but also it's something that is not an important line item. And I think it's something that is a challenge that we're seeing. So while we're very proud of having been the first black-owned agency to win Campaign of the Year for the first time in 22 years, it is an indictment to the industry, right? Because it just shows you how so many people are excluded from this industry, and how many black people in particular are excluded from it. And I think we need to do all we can to try to showcase the diversity of the industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I also kind of want to sneakily ask you about government's role in it, considering the MAC Charter and how it's existed for however long. But in all honesty, I don't know who uses it as a reference point for anything. What are your thoughts? Do you think we all need to get together and rewrite it, or where's it going? Where's it going in terms of helping us move forward with this industry?
I think like many documents that we workshop and put together in the country, the big issues around implementation of what we do agree. I think the MAC Charter itself, does make provision for the area of inclusivity and of course diversity within the industry, but who enforces that? That's the challenge. There is and how it's going to be enforced. And it's much like the Constitution, great Constitution, and yet, we
Look
still
at the
have
society.
the society that isn't necessarily living up to it, because the implementation aspects of it are a huge challenge. In our industry, I guess the challenge is that there are so many voices, but there isn't enough of a drive to ensure that the implementation of some of those key areas are being outlined. Both you and I know that 20 years ago, we were talking about transformation.
Yep.
When we started in the industry, it was about, we need to transform. And we still continue talking about transformation today as if it is sort of like a nice to have, or when you've done everything else, then you can transform.
Yes, it's like a buzzword, really.
It's a buzzword. And it's actually disappointing in how slowly this wheel has been turning around it, and it creates a lot of frustration for young people that want to get into the industry.
Absolutely.
But also what I've seen in the last couple of years particularly, it's also resulting in us as an industry losing to other industries, because people just get fed up. Great talent, great
Absolutely.
black leaders leave our industry to then pursue another industry, because
That's more invested.
and they're probably tired of
Absolutely.
fighting this for so many years. So we have a lot to do, and I wish that one day we'll get to a point where it's not just complaining about it, but that we are able to really support and build and encourage this area of inclusivity.
Absolutely. Okay, and on a more light-hearted note, let's talk influencer marketing. So in my view, and in the view of many people on the Twitter streets, influencer marketing is getting a bad rep.
Yeah.
You work quite closely, or certainly the people in your company work quite closely with influencers and brands. So what are the wrongs and rights? What are the do's and don'ts? And I'm sure there's a long list, but what are the key ones? Because I think it has a role.
It's
just not always executed well.
I think like many sort of buzz terms and interesting new technologies and insights that come in within the industry as a whole, it changes very quickly. So influencer marketing today, it has evolved a lot than before. It was about, let's tweet something and hope for the best, right? Or utilize the influencer's reputation to drive your reputation, and vice versa. And now we are seeing that the evolution of it is no longer just about you just selecting influencers and hoping that you're going to land your message, but it's also being much more authentic in the right influencer. Also figuring out strategically whether the influencer strategy is the right strategy to utilize
to begin
for,
with.
because I think in the last, since lockdown, we've seen already like some examples
Some no-nos
that are just a disaster for, why would you use influencer marketing to try to drive such a big issue or such a challenging, conversation. So I think do's and don'ts are plenty. But I think at the core of it is making sure that the right people who are much more attuned or closer to your message and your brand promise is the ultimate most important thing. Because aligning the right person with the right brand it's where it starts. But unfortunately, nowadays it's like a money's game, right? So you just pay, and then you can, as an influencer, you can influence Coca-Cola today and Pepsi tomorrow and Nestle
Competing
tomorrow
brands,
and Beacon
exactly.
tomorrow, because it's about money. And I think that's the challenge, is that it's not a bulletproof solution for every marketing problem or challenge. But if it done right, it does really deliver some really good returns.
Absolutely. And I mean, speaking of which, you've worked on quite a few campaigns of late that have been quite exciting. Quite recently, the collaboration between Somizi and Batu. Tell us a little bit about why that actually works. I saw some of the pieces, the shoes, that are exactly that, a fit, How do you think people can produce successful work like that?
It boils down to the right relationship and the right kind of alignment, because whether it's Testic and Laduma Makhosa, for an example, that we did for Tiger Brands, which was also a just two brands that just kind of got each other, and the values permeate quite strongly. Absolutely. And when you look at Batu and Somizi, or Batu and Kanye, or Somizi and Testic, for an example, they already are quite embedded in that space or in that brand. And so it was so easy then to translate it and for it to be believable in the marketplace. It was not a check issue, a money issue, but it was we want to work together and be able to build a win-win partnership. And I think brands can engage with influencers long in advance. Have a network of them before, so it's not.
That's true.
It's not just now we're in a campaign. Now let's go find someone.
We've got a short deadline. We need to find someone we know. It doesn't matter if they match or not. Yeah.
So if you're working on KFC, for an example, it's important as a brand team to know who are.
It's just not anyone who eats KFC like me.
And me. Well, but it's find already your network of people that are around your brand, then for them to become the influencers in the future is so much easier because they already engage with the brand in that way.
So we've seen quite a huge trend of smaller agencies, brand-driven agencies sprouting up all over the country. What would you say, having been in the business 9 years successfully, what would you say to them, sort of as a secret to success? One thing that you would say to them.
One thing. Wow. I think what would be important then is just reiterating the fact that our industry is not just an easy industry to just get into and to work on. It requires skill, it requires knowledge, and it's an important contributor. I think sometimes when you start your agency and you're almost seen as a little addition to the industry somehow, you almost belittle your power that you have as a brand professional. So focusing on the professional aspects of what we do is paramount, because we can't continue to be seen as a fun industry, a events industry, balloons and cupcakes, girls and boys.
Yes.
We are highly skilled individuals, and I think the way that we show up needs to be able to demonstrate that to business, because the big question in business today is, what is the value of brand comms? What is the value that you are adding to the business?
Yes.
And so for us to be able to get into the right table, so we are able to showcase who we are, we also need to just be that much more buttoned up and focused in then how we show up. No longer do we need to look at PR and communication as just when all your budget is allocated, then you allocate some PR budget. Now it can become the big driver,
the driving force
of that message and of that business as well. It's so important that our industry, and if you're a young agency coming up, just see yourself as a big and important contributor to this industry and to business as a whole. So you're not just a sideline and a thing that we add at the end of it. Because I think the more we show up like that, the less seriously we'll be taken as an industry.
Absolutely. And I feel like, Joburg and sometimes Cape Town, even though they sometimes are a few months behind, it's a hustler's town, and Durban, the whole of South Africa, let me not,
Yes, of course, you'll be in trouble.
I know.
And Polokwane, and PE, okay, everyone.
Everybody.
That's right.
Everyone's hustling. So you expect people to, to try and create something new, exciting. But I love what you're saying about take yourself seriously and understand and respect the industry you're coming into, because it is actually, you're right, the secret to your success.
Absolutely.
No matter what you stand for as a brand.
We see it as a very important part of what we do for our clients. So it's not a last minute thing, but it has to be at the forefront of business as a whole. It's an important industry, and I think if you think about it, when we were ushered into COVID, what was the big thing that business were trying to do?
Exactly.
How do we communicate to our staff?
Exactly.
How do we communicate to our audiences? How do we drive these messages? Because you can't just put a TV ad because they were not available or you were not available in that way, or radio or whatever. You needed to find alternative ways to do that, and comms allowed for us to be at the forefront of how do we disseminate this message about wash your hands, put your mask on, social distancing, all those key things. PR headed together. So we definitely deserve a round of applause for our contribution in business.
Absolutely agreed. So you're also an author.
Yes.
And let's talk a little bit about Stand Against Bland. Firstly, the title is everything. I think it speaks precisely to positioning and what the book is actually about. You know, what showing up, how you show up, and how you direct your career.
That's right.
What was the inspiration behind writing the book? Because I feel like it's a good combination of sort of individual advice as well as business and life advice.
What was obvious for me was that, I mean, I must say, I never thought I was going to be an author in that way. You know, it was one of those things that you leave for when you are 80,
Yes.
you know, later on in life. However, on a daily basis, I would receive hundreds of messages on social media, people asking me a question related to the career, the business, the industry, why, how come, how did you do it, etc. And I felt perhaps maybe I should just try to put it all together in some form that I know I can't respond to every social media request, but I could direct someone to a space where they can be able to get more information about how I did it. So it was really just trying to answer a lot of questions that were coming up, and I felt that there was an opportunity to also showcase that an experience, anyone's experience is important, and it may be beneficial to someone else. And we don't all have to be 85 to start writing. I think we can all write now, we can all contribute, and we can all share. And I think that was quite humbling for me, because I was incredibly excited about the process. And I think I walked away having learned so much more, also about me, about the industry, and also just looking back at some of the key things that has become a big contributor to my life and what I do. And I was hoping that it would do the same for someone else.
And I think it absolutely has. I mean, I've seen so many people making comments about it, sort of asking questions, referencing, you know, some of the content that's within the book. And I think the most important thing for me about the book is the authenticity of it, you know, the fact that, you know, people can relate to this boy from Soweto who had dreams beyond, you know, what he could see in front of him. And, you know, look at him now. How I mean, it's an inspiration, which I love. I think for your first book, it's exactly what we needed, and not just something about brands and this is how brands work, etc. How important is that in a society like ours that lacks so many examples of someone like you?
Oh, I think it's everything. I must say, honestly, that initially, definitely, the kind of book that I wanted to write also was a big challenge to land, because, you know, you could definitely do like 20 steps of how to build the brand or whatever, you know, something that is so obvious in what I do, right? But I thought that the story was also quite important. The story that you and I come from, you know, spaces that needed us to push beyond to be here within this industry, for example. You know, it wasn't a normal thing for us to, you know, for black people to get into, and there were not necessarily the easiest steps available for you to do so. And I felt that the authenticity of my story cannot live without the authenticity of my life, which is, you know, the where it all comes from and where it all starts. And I know that even though I was a student many years ago, there are many people who are students today who are going through the same things, who are wondering about the same things. So for me, it was important that the journey was also reflective of where someone could find themselves today. So it's not just about success and where we are right now, but it's about just a journey that starts from nowhere. And by chance, for some reason, it works because of just being in the right space or
meeting chance halfway, really.
Exactly. So it was humbling, and I have to say that the response has been phenomenal. And I thought my mom, my dad, my sisters
be
are
like,
gonna,
yeah,
this is great. But I mean, you know, just
yeah.
getting on the bestseller list was
just
incredible, because it just showed that people resonated with the content, and I'm grateful.
Absolutely. I know I bought like 10 copies.
Oh, thank you.
The Prism Young judges that year. So
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
I think it's fantastic, and really people don't often congratulate you for that, because they kind of feel like, well, you should be writing. But it's a tough space, especially in our country. So I think well done for that. And
thank you.
We can't wait for the next one.
Thank you so much. I'm also looking forward to the next one.
Yes. So let's zoom a little bit into the industry. What are, I mean, COVID taken into consideration and every other challenge that we're faced with on a day-to-day, I feel like every time we speak, it's actually about, oh my gosh, we're quickly rushing there, getting that done, you know, just to keep building, to keep going. What would you say is the current state of the industry? And what are we going to do to ensure that we are 10 times better? Because, you know, we need to be on the same pace as the rest of the globe.
There are two areas for me that I found quite fascinating and interesting and challenging and. On the one hand, we are all living in an ecosystem that is reliant of each other. So what's happening with the vaccine does impact what's going to be happening in our offices and in the clients and in consumers' world. So just being able to keep up with what's happening in that area. So at a macro level, you know, just making sure that as an agency or as a business, you are aligned with what's going on, so that you're not, you know, pulling the wrong way or aligning in the wrong direction. Because it's also very possible, right? Because you see people that are saying, oh, we're extending our offices during this period, or we're moving into big offices during this period, or we're expanding, building a new division, you know. So it's you gotta be able to understand what's going on across the whole entire, you know, value chain. Then the other part for me, which has been challenging, I have to say, is in this time where I think survival is important for our businesses, it's so easy also to make the wrong decisions as you try to survive. So how much we're being paid, the time that is required to do the work. For some reason, this period has made people believe that magic can be created even quicker, cheaper. You know, and I think that is such a dangerous place to be, because sometimes we then, because all of our businesses are desperate to sustain ourselves, we may also be cutting corners in parts because we want to get the business or get the job, etc. And I find that quite fascinating on two fronts. One, the clients believe that, you know, they can barter and negotiate much more because we're all needing to, you know, sharpen the pencil. They're taking advantage of that. And on the other hand, from our end as well, is that because we're also trying to keep our lights on, we also are taking on things that maybe we wouldn't have taken in before. So I found that tug of war quite challenging to manage, you know, for me around this time, because of course there's the output and there's a work front, which is delivering the business and what's required there. But there's also, we're managing a pandemic. Journalists have lost jobs. Titles have closed down. Media houses are, so
even
actually
comms agencies, advertising agencies, people have shut doors. Jobs have been lost.
So it is the reality of it is that it's a tough place to you know, to be. That journalist is holding on to that job, to that role. They're doing much more than they used to do before, because people are led, have been retrenched. So, you know, I always, in the last couple of months particularly, I've always been very, you know, vocal to clients and everybody about just sometimes we can't forget the fact that this is a challenging time, and so the requirements and what is needed, the expectations, must also be within a context that makes sense.
And speaking of industry bodies, what do you think, you know, the bodies that are within industries, I mean, in ours it happens to be PRISA, but what do you think bodies such as PRISA and others can do in terms of actually assisting the industry to become better?
I think bodies like PRISA are important in being able to be the lighthouse for the industry. You know, like we spoke earlier about what advice do we give to young up-and-coming agencies. I think that's where the gap between the bodies like PRISA and some of those young people, that's where we close that gap to say, this is how you do it. This is how you manage. And I think bodies like PRISA should be charting a path and engaging with government in support of industries over this period. You know, like, and we're seeing sports industries are coming together to say, let's try to work together.
Tourism.
Artists are doing the same thing. Tourism are doing the same thing. And I guess in our industry, you know,
there's a gap.
There's a huge gap. And I think sometimes we forget the role of bodies like that. And that's why for some agencies, there's not even a reason to be part of that, because you don't see the benefit to it. And I think that there's a big gap between what we say as bodies and what we do. You know, it's whether it's transformation, whether it's costs or a body that represents us in key areas of government, etc. We say the right things, but we hardly do what we say.
Absolutely, totally agreed. I think it's important to show up. Like you said, you can have a document that's lying around that's talking about how things should be done, but at the end of the day, you've got to walk the talk. And I think it's a core issue that needs to start right at the center and then spread out to the rest of us, because I think a lot of people are ready to back up the message, to show up for the message, to show what execution looks like, you know. So yeah, let's see. I think the next 10 years should be interesting, and should be really driven by growth.
Yeah, that's it. And I must say, you know, even if we say the next 10 years, if you think about it, it's so scary, right?
Yeah.
Because it means for so long we are still going to be, you know, lugging this.
We'll be seeing some grey hairs.
You know, exactly. Can we just, you know, the next 5 years, can we see a huge change? Because graduates are coming into the system, and the system is not managing.
It's not ready.
It's not ready to keep it. The industry itself is not really, you know, at the core of what we're trying to do. Then we're seeing an influx and exit.
Yes.
An influx and exit. And we just never seem to go. And what then happens is that we have a gap. Young, bright, you know, professionals just go to other industries. And then we are left with old, tired professionals.
Yes.
And that's not what we need.
No, it's absolutely not. I mean, whilst it's respectable to have a lot of years, you know, in the industry, you need fresh blood in any industry.
Absolutely.
You know?
It's almost like what Robbie Hernandez used to say to me, the balance, the energy of the young and the wisdom of the old, all coming together to build something.
Absolutely.
And I think if we don't have enough of the young infused in leadership in these spaces, then it's the old folks speaking amongst themselves and everybody else just pushing based on what they do, and I think that is not effective.
No, not at all, not at all. Okay, so you are a brand expert in my view, and I think in the view of the entire industry. So I just wanted to ask you, what are the trends that you see coming up, and how can people take advantage of them? And like you said, some of the people who are starting up, you know, how can people jump on that?
I've seen so many interesting things pop up. Internal marketing, I think we're going to see a return into it in a big way, because we're seeing that, and I think in the last year, that it's so critical to have that button down. So it's no longer just a nice to have after you've done the big campaign externally, but how we engage with our people as marketing or brand teams, engaging with our businesses. It's so vital and critical, and we've learned that. So I've seen that return, which I think is important and is respectable. I think that's going to be quite good. Also, for the small agencies, huge opportunity to really take on the big agencies, because clients are looking for much more efficiencies, and you are seeing that during lockdown and you know, the last COVID year, let's call it,
and working from home,
a lot was still done, a lot was still delivered, but effectively utilizing some of the smaller players. You can make calls quickly and make things happen. So I think that there's an opportunity, because there's almost like a democracy, you know, of ideas happening. And I think that no longer is it just going to be about big agencies, big clients only, but you're going to see smaller players taking on the bigger, you know, clients and doing such a good work, you know, in that. Because it's not always about ability; it's just always about the opportunity and the expectation, whether you can deliver it or not. I'm also seeing an interesting thing around working from home, living remotely, and I think that is open even for us. We can employ someone who's based in PE without a problem, as long as they can do that. And I think in the past maybe we might have frowned because it was just a little bit weird to do, but now we are seeing that the nature of remote working and so how the office is going to look is also something that's interesting that I think one needs to look into and adjust. I know I'm doing the same, just figuring out what is the best way
Yeah.
to manage this. We don't need 1,000 square meters
Anymore.
but maybe
Yeah.
we need 400 and how that works. So I
Yes.
think that's been quite interesting. The influencer is still going to be important,
Yes.
influencer marketing, particularly for brands that are not just sort of fun consumer brands, but for business brands, serious brands.
Yes, because there are. I think people often think influencer has to do with fun brands and young people, but there are influencers in more corporate scenes that
and
are.
I think that corporate is starting to see value in that kind of drive. So the influencer spectrum is going to expand even further than just, it's for consumer branding or for FMCG brands, cool luxury brands, for example, only. But influence is becoming that much more respected. And we need to just look at it that it's not just a Sarah Langer kind of person who determines what an influencer marketing looks like, but there could be some really strong individuals who can help your brand. I think that that is going to be quite interesting to see. I'm also from an academic perspective. I've been engaging a lot with the likes of University of Joburg around psychology within what we do, and seeing how that impact, and so the area of empathy, soft skills like that are becoming so vital. Because you need to care about people when you're going through a pandemic, right?
Absolutely.
You need to protect your team before you think about the bottom line, right? And so it's if you're not that way inclined, it's a difficult thing to manage.
It is, and it's not a skill that's automatically taught to business leaders as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
no,
I agree with you. It is an area that needs a lot of attention, and actually something we don't often give enough attention to.
Absolutely. And I think on a personal note as well, I think the value of family and friends and friendship, I think that's also, I've seen that it has bloomed that much more. So you see the importance of family, the importance of good friendships. Because I think going through a difficult time like this, and it could be peer-to-peer like you and I, calling each other and saying, hey, how are you doing from a business perspective, is a friendship that's beyond just a professional realm, and us being able to wire and support and nurture our friendships and our family, because that determines how we then show up elsewhere.
Exactly, and I think that is such an important point. I mean, at the end of the day, we deal with people within our industries. So you're right. How you show up is really very much linked to your tribe. The people you show up with.
That's it.
So that's a very important aspect.
That's it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sylvester. What a touching way to end our conversation. It's always a pleasure chatting to you. And again, I mean, geez, 9 more years to come, please. I can't wait.
Yes. For now, it's just 1 until 10. Then we'll take it year on year, okay? Year by year. All right? No
but I'm going to go with the 9 times tables, because, you can count them on your hands. Yeah.
So someone said to me, in fact, one of my team members said, which means we are, we need another, 91 years to 100. I said, can you imagine? I just, imagine.
And you know what? It is so possible.
It
is so possible. And I think that's the dream. And I think the fact that the foundation is there just creates that reality almost, that idea of this being something you can actually attain.
Yeah. I know. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sylvester. That's it for this episode of Byline Sylvester Chauke. You can also follow the awards on Twitter on @ThePrismAwards. Albert Einstein once said, "Creativity is contagious. Pass it on." Goodbye.